Tyldesley says 4 of those 9 don't count. I didn't say that at all.
Oh, he's found a way through to Hadji.
We talked about the commentary charts, and there are 2 kinds of commentary charts that we print up and are available. This is the commentary chart for the last game that we talked about, with all the players from Liverpool and Milan in 2005. That's what I had in front of me, a kickoff in Istanbul. This is a different kind of research sheet. This is something that I keep going for many, many major teams. This is what I call a results and appearances grid, so that every game that's been played in the season, all the results, all the players who played, and ticks and substitutes for when they appeared. So the commentary chart that we have for the Invincibles season 2021 is in fact the season's grid. It is the record of all the games that Rangers played in that unbeaten year. At the start of 2020, I'd just been given the news by ITV in the summer of that year. They no longer required me to be their England senior commentator. They'd found somebody younger. Okay, we're all a matter of opinion. I didn't like it, but you've got to accept it. What it meant was that I was a freelance and I was looking for work. And Rangers Television asked me if I would go and commentate for them. And I was skeptical, really. I didn't like the idea of commentating for a club. We've talked about your affiliations and being neutral and being editorially strong. And I didn't really like the idea of being in the pay of a football club to call their games. But they convinced me that because their season ticket holders are so much more important to the business model of Rangers and Celtic than down south, where the TV money is considerable, that they wanted to keep their season ticket holders, but provide them with free coverage of the games. And they wanted that coverage to be top level during the period of the lockdown. Part of the appeal was that I go way back to Steven Gerrard. I remember him as a gawky 15-year-old at Liverpool, and I knew Gary McAllister. I took the gig. I needed work, and it sounded like a good deal. I did not know when I called the first Rangers game in an empty stadium, they weren't going to lose that season. I mean, they'd only been promoted back into the Premiership in Scotland, I think, 3 seasons. The previous season, they put themselves into a really good position at halfway and blew it. And Celtic had won the title for the 9th year in a row. Now, stupid Sassenach didn't really get the idea of 9 in a row. What's this 9 in a row everybody's talking about? Celtic were bidding to go 10. In the 1960s and 1970s, Jock Stein's great Celtic team won 9 Scottish titles in a row. Rangers stopped them in the 10th season. In the 80s and 90s, Graham Souness, Walter Smith's great Rangers teams won 9 Scottish titles in a row. Celtic stopped them, making it 10. And here was Steven Gerrard trying to stop Celtic from winning 10 in a row. And the first game I commentated on, this 10 in a row thing was just echoing in my head throughout the match. And at the end of the game, which Rangers won, I said, off the top of my head, I don't think stopping 10 in a row is good motivation. I think motivation for anything in life should be a positive force, not a negative force trying to stop somebody else from doing something. I think the Rangers' motivation this season should be 55. That they had won 54 league titles, which was at the time equal the world record of Linfield in Northern Ireland for the number of national titles won by any club anywhere in world football. So I said famously, 55 should be your motivation. Forget 10 in a row. You weren't even in the league for 4 of Celtic's 9. You were down the divisions. Well, Daily Record got this. Tyldesley says 4 of those 9 don't count. I didn't say that at all. Big banner headlines, abuse, quite rightly, from Celtic fans who hadn't heard what I'd said and the context I'd said it in. So suddenly I was at the middle of a bit of a Glaswegian maelstrom, and that taught me a lot. It taught me you are an outsider. You don't belong here. you're being employed to do a job, stay out of our fight. It's a bit like coming between two guys in a pub who have got it in for each other and who regularly fight, and you're trying to just leave out of it. We'll sort this out. And so I just became far more diplomatic with everything that I said from that point onwards. So I had to absorb a lot of this kind of advice from my first couple of games in Glasgow. But I understand Glasgow football far better now than I did when I went in there. And generally, I was very well received. I enjoyed doing the games. I'm not sure that I would ever be welcome at Celtic Park like I have been in the past anymore, because you're either us or you're them. And I suppose I am now us.
Is it more difficult to commentate for a club and have that perspective, or is it easier as a neutral? And which do you prefer?
I think it's easy when they win every week, which Rangers did.
Yeah.
It was interesting, actually, when the fans came back into the stadium, there was an automatic assumption that it would be a positive, and it is a positive. It's a positive for football, let alone for Rangers Football Club. And I think certain clubs miss their fans. I think Liverpool and maybe Celtic missed their fans more than some. Rangers played actually quite a controlled game under Steven Gerrard, and there were games when it was 0-0 after 70 minutes against a lesser opponent, where they were able to be patient and take their time and back their quality and maybe their substitutes bench to win the game in the final quarter. That becomes more difficult to do when the fans come back in. And I think one or two of the Rangers players have felt that in the season just gone. It's a different kind of a challenge. And I think it has been for different players around the country. But I mentioned right at the start of this interview that who do I support? I support my mates. And the infamous England-Iceland game, one of my mates, Roy Hodgson, who is just the most wonderful man. I mean, anybody and everybody of any age would love Roy's company. He's a proper football guy. Roy, Ray Lewington, Gary Neville was on that coaching staff. I had friendships with all of them, and I was covering the games. And I had a friend in my ear, my editor at the time at ITV, Mark DeMuth, is a good friend, and he knew of my friendship with Roy. And, England were awful that night. And with a couple of minutes to go, Mark DeMuth actually said in my ear that you couldn't hear, you're going to have to call this, Roy's position. And I've got what we call a lazy button where I can speak back to him. And I actually said, I was the commentator in 1999. I'll wait to the final whistle if that's okay. Because if England equalised, I mean, it's only 2-1. England equalised, whatever, extra time, and who knows what happens from there. But the final whistle blew, and England were beaten. And somebody who my wife and I, we'd been out for meals with Roy and Sheila, and I have to an audience of over 20 million people say this man's position is untenable. He's going to have to go.
Yeah, very difficult stuff, that. And I want to just bring it back to Ibrox and Rangers and those empty stands, because that's a scenario that hopefully we'll never have to see ever again. But as a commentator in that situation, did you realise how important the fans are and the crowd noise is to your job?
Just a bit. And I think we realised it even more when it came back. I think we became a little attuned to I used to call it the Marie Celeste football that we were watching. You always felt that you'd see tumbleweed going across the pitch at some stage. It was very, very strange. We could park right outside the stadium. To get from Old Trafford back to the motorway took 8 minutes rather than 88 minutes. There were kind of benefits. There were no motorway jams at 1 o'clock in the morning when they decided to close part of the M6. But no, it was terrible. And I think it was a challenge for us as commentators. And funny enough, I've written about this in the book. One of the reasons that I think Alan McCoist is such a gem in UK football broadcasting is that I think he is in touch with the average viewer, with the average fan. I think he is the kind of guy who you could walk into your local and see him at the bar and feel as if you could sit down next to and have half an hour in his company, and you could, and it would be half an hour, but some of the best 30 minutes in your life, because he is the most wonderful company. But he's amenable, he's accessible. I think that some of the commentary during lockdown became a little too earnest for my liking. All the praise for the Premier League for getting this on and everything. Yeah, okay, organisational problems and all the testing that had to go on. Yeah, there were some logistical issues, but why was it there? It was there because television contracts had to be satisfied, and football needed the money, and television needed the action, and it was there because the government basically wanted a distraction for the rest of us from, going doolally locked up in our own houses. So it was there for strategic reasons, some very practical business reasons, and I think actually most of the public got that. So I think when commentators started to drool about the wonder of football still being played in the middle of this, oh, wait a minute, it's been played for some very economic reasons. And you never heard Ali talking like that. You never heard Ali sort of rise to some celestial cloud where football is a grand and noble thing. It's not. It's wonderful. It's wonderful because it's rough and raw, and it surprises us, and it frustrates us, and it angers us, and sometimes it has us jumping around the room like nothing else in our lives. That is football, and so much of that was missing inside an empty stadium. And I think you had to try to reflect that in your commentary. And I certainly, as time went on, during those lockdowns, tried to bring that subject matter into the commentary. Even the fake crowd noise. I always watch football without it. If I was watching at home, are we trying to kid? Why do we have fake crowd noise? And actually, when people were given a choice, they opted for the fake crowd noise. That's how programmed we are to what it's almost like you're playing FIFA without crowd noise. It's not, FIFA's not real. And this football was barely real. So don't try to make it feel real by putting in canned laughter, basically. It's like a shit comedy program. It's got to have canned laughter because no fucker laughing. It was the same thing. And forgive my French, but it got me angry. And I felt privileged to be in the stadium. Yeah. Still to be working when most of the country was on furlough or out of work, but not so grand about it that actually, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. It was far from the greatest thing that happened to me. All the greatest things that have happened to me inside a football ground have happened in the company of tens of thousands of people.
I'll finish with one final question on Rangers and a man that you know quite well. You've seen grow up, Steven Gerrard. You've really commentated on two of his defining moments, one as a player in Istanbul and one as a manager, winning that league title, going unbeaten. What's he like as a man, and how close did you get?
He's two men. And probably the key to my job is understanding that. I've touched on the experience I had with Roy Hodgson and with Dave Jones. You wouldn't get that. And indeed with Sir Alex Ferguson, the fact that you would only cross him once, and so don't cross him. You'd only get that. It's no 3 strikes and you're out. If you let him down, if you lie to him or you betray him in some way, that will be it. I feel I've known Steven since he was 15. I think I would only ever let him down once. And we had 2 relationships. We had a relationship where we would chat and message during the week, which some team information or some insight into what was coming may happen. And then we had a relationship on a match day. And one of the wonderful things about being behind closed door in Rangers was behind closed door in every other stadium, I didn't get to see anybody. You didn't get in physical contact, conversation contact with any of your contacts in the game. At Rangers, I was obviously tested up and eventually jabbed up. We would both wear a mask, but we would go into a room and keep a social distance, but we would have a meeting about that game. At 1:30, he would tell me his team and he would tell me what he thought about the opposition to give me some insight. And so I retained that personal contact. But that conversation was not, hi, how's Alex? How's Susan? How are the kids? That didn't happen on match day. He was a different person on match day. And I love that. You know where you stand with somebody. And his players and staff would love that. I used to say, "You got your game face on today, haven't you?" And he'd go, "Yeah, okay, that's it." And they would laugh, be out of it. And then maybe next day we'd have a bit of a giggle about it. If there were Rangers fans watching who are disappointed that he left when he did, I get that, and he gets that. It was on the eve of a big cup tie at Hampden, a big semi-final at Hampden, with a big European game to come. He didn't choose the timing. He didn't know about Aston Villa until about a week before it happened. So this was a decision that he was faced with. All his life really has been around English football in the Premier League. But more importantly, he lived essentially on Merseyside in the Southport area. And the number of times that I would talk to him on a Saturday morning to get some team news, he would be on the M74. He would have gone home after training on Friday in Glasgow, back to Merseyside, just to see Alex and the kids. And Saturday morning, driving himself, not a driver, he drove himself back to be there at lunchtime for when the players met for a game. These guys are very, very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. But their family lives are naturally disrupted by football. The ones who still value their family life, like Steven Gerrard, if they get an opportunity to move closer to home, to be able to get home every night, pretty much from training, then that's going to be a big sway in their decision. And the only insight that I can offer you into Steven's decision are the number of phone calls that I had with him on the M74. And the M74 is no place for any of us to be.